Hi guys, it's Sam from Sammy's Reviews, and today's video I'm gonna be recommending some of my favorite music that I've been listening to during the quarantine. Now, I have not been talking about music lately on my channel. I've been talking about movies and books, TV shows. Before getting into what type of music I've been obsessed with the past few months, let's just address something. Let's just address how COVID-19 and the lockdown has affected cinema and music. The lockdown has affected the cinema in a very negative way. Movies are being cancelled, some shootings have been delayed into further notice, a lot of movies are being released on streaming services. However, it has affected music in a completely different way. I believe that the lockdown has started a new era of music. A lot of artists stopped touring and they focus solely into making, writing and producing their music, and some even go to the extent of making an entire album in their own house, which resulted into very creative albums throughout this year and specifically during the quarantine. So before diving into my favorite albums of the year, I would like to mention some honorable mentions. These albums were not as good as the one I'm going to be mentioning in the future. However, they deserve to be recognized, and that's it. Let's go. So we have number 1 is Rina Sawayama's Sawayama. Rina Sawayama is a very unique artist, and her debut album only capitalizes on that. This collection of tracks sounds exactly like divas pop music that would come out in the early 2000s. It thrives on nostalgia, and some of the production here even reminds me of the work of Templand from that era. This album is not connected by a theme, nor the songs share any sort of quality. On the contrary, each song is different and it's almost like a buffet. Each song you listen to is completely unlike the one before it or the one after it, which could be a plus. You know, sometimes people like that, and it could be very bothersome to some other people. However, I feel like it loses some of its charm after a few replays, and it feels a bit too long, so that's not always a good sign. So on to album number 2, we have Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers. Punisher is a very solid album. It's moody, it's emotional, it's filled with slow ballads mixed with low and simplistic production, with of course a few exceptions. It's definitely a grower. You will not like this album the first time round, and I can almost guarantee that. Especially if you listen to the promotional single Kyoto and you expect more of that, because I think this song gives the wrong impression about the whole album. After a few listens, I can acknowledge that it's solid. However, it's not completely my taste, since Phoebe's voice is not really that special. And she compensates that with character, which I like, and the production is mostly not that interesting, except with the horn arrangement, which is gorgeous. And the closure of this album kind of remind me of an airplane over the sea, so yeah, that's a good sign. I enjoyed it enough to put it here, and that's it. Album number 3 is How I'm Feeling Now by Charli XCX. If you don't like Charli, this is not the album that will change your mind. It's not as good as her last LP, which I think is a masterpiece, but I love Charli's production. The details in her production is very enjoyable, and it's enjoyable enough for me to listen to the entire album. Also, one of the most interesting things about this album is that it was made during the quarantine, and it was talking about how Charli feels during the quarantine, which is insane how she got this album done that fast and that good. And it only shows how Charli is a very unique and expressive voice in the world of pop, and I highly recommend this album. It's noisy and it's everything you'd expect from Charli at this point. Album number 4 is Petals for Armor by Hayley Williams, and although my review might be a little bit negative, however, this album is worth listening to and it's worth putting on my list. Hayley Williams' debut is honestly a little bit underwhelming. She's one of my favorite female singers ever, and she was the heart and soul of the band Paramore, and her departure from this band is a big deal. However, she tries her best in this album to differentiate herself from her band and to establish a new persona and a new image. I'm just not sure it worked. Maybe because of the way she released the album, it kind of spoiled it, and releasing a few tracks every now and then for a few months as an EP, I don't know, I just don't feel it. However, the album is very long, and it lacks a bit of personality, and the lyrics are almost too weak. The production, however, saves a few tracks, but that's it. Overall, I think it's a step for Hayley to establish her new image. I'm just not sure it's in the right direction. However, I included this album because of how much I love Hayley and how much I appreciate her hard work mentally and physically. It must have taken her to be a solo artist after being the front of a band with a completely different approach in tone and in genre even. The first album we're going to be talking about is The New Abnormal by The Strokes. I had the honor of checking out the discography of The Strokes right before the release of their new album, so I got to see the latest form the band came to be in the very last album they made. And this is so interesting because in this album, they just sound like they're having fun. This album is fun. It's fun for the listener, it's fun for the band. Let's not forget the incredible drum work from Fab Moretti. While it syncs perfectly with Julian's voice in songs like The Adults Are Talking and my personal favorite song in the album, Ode to the Mets, this song is absolutely perfect. I recommend checking out this song even if you don't like The Strokes or even if you don't know who are The Strokes, because this song's progression is something that needs to be taught, and how the songs builds up to the chorus is actually very fascinating. Also, the phenomenal guitar work from both Albert Hammond Jr. and Nick Valenci in songs like Why Are Sundays So Depressing and the amazing intro of Not the Same Anymore. This album from start to finish is easy to get through, it's fun to listen to. The minute you start the album, it feels like it's already ending. And this is not only in The New Abnormal. The Strokes are known for very lightweight, easy, engaging songs from the very first album they made. I recommend, if you like The New Abnormal, you should definitely check out Is This It?, another 10 out of 10 album. Also, fun fact, amongst releasing this album, the band was releasing constant YouTube videos under the name 5 Guys Talk About Things They Know Nothing About. In this series, they discuss behind the scenes stories, they talk about the journey of recording this album, and they promote smaller artists. I'm gonna link their video down below. Second album I'm gonna be talking about is After Hours by The Weeknd. Now, The Weeknd is known to be one of the finest voices in the pop culture genre. He is known for his uncomparable voice and the ranges it can reach. In albums like Beauty Behind the Madness, Starboy, and his debut album Trilogy, which are albums that are still worth listening to this very day, The Weeknd was able to create a persona of his own. But he has been stereotyped into this rapper with lots of attention and lots of money, and The Weeknd accepted this role in Beauty Behind the Madness and fully embraced it in Starboy. But it made it very challenging and hard for him to break this mold. But with the release of this album, The Weeknd was able to do so. This album was excellently produced by Abel himself and Metro Boomin, in which they released footage of the persona before releasing the entire album. They released the new hairstyle, the red suit, the old vintage sunglasses, and they created an atmosphere and tone for the album before its release. Then later on, with the cinematically shot, huge budget music videos, Abel was able to draw an interesting new character. So let's discuss the singles that came out before the album. In number 1, we have Heartless. Heartless has a very catchy chorus, it's very well written, and it's a very good introduction to the character. We have a dramatic character who always discusses how hurt he is, which is very clear in the lyrics of Heartless. Blinding Lights has an amazing vocal performance from The Weeknd with a very catchy chorus, and it has a music video that is shot like a dream sequence. And finally, In Your Eyes. This song is absolutely perfect. It's my favorite of the entire album. It's very well written and it's very well performed by Abel himself. And its music video, on the other hand, is uncomparable. Honestly, it feels like an 80s slasher movie with an amazing performance from The Weeknd during the music video, and the music video gives an entirely new meaning to the lyrics. Other important songs in the album include Alone Again, Hard to Love, and Until I Bleed Out, where they are dramatically written and dramatically performed. The third album I'm going to be talking about is Denzel Curry's Unlocked. Denzel Curry has been one of the most important rappers in this decade, dropping some of the best rap albums the past few years, including The Dark and Moody Taboo in 2018 and The Colorful Homie Summary Zoo in 2019. Honestly, this year he could have taken a break and it would not affect his career. He has been doing enough the past few years, But especially this year, Denzel is as active as ever, releasing so many great features and 2 excellent projects, including Blood In, Blood Out, which is a heartfelt mix of post-punk, metal and rap with processed vocals, and the entire project feels like one big song because of how smooth the transition from one song to another is. And it feels like something out of a nightmare, and I mean that in the best way possible. But his second project this year with Kenny Beats gotta be one of the best things he has released. And it's only 18 minutes long, with sick beats and high notes and awesome voice manipulation and comic book-esque sort of outros, which reminds me of Mad Villainy. Even some songs, they are only made of one verse, but with the amazing flow and excellent use of wordplay and the charisma of Denzel Curry, he really makes these songs pop. Some of the best tracks in this album are Diet, which has a raspy, grungy attitude of Denzel Curry, and he feels like a 90s punk rock artist. Also Take It Back, where Denzel Curry drops many interesting references such as Frederick Douglass or Sun Tzu. The second part of the album is chill and laid back. What's really interesting about this album is the promotional material. Now, this album was dropped as if it was leaked on the internet, and Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats are going through the internet to try to stop it from being leaked with a series of excellently animated music videos, and each music video has a different type of animation which keeps things very interesting, with references such as Samurai Jack and Junji Ito's Uzumaki, which is very creative. Overall, the album is highly energetic and very fast paced. It's only flaw that it's not longer. Very much recommended. Now on to Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple. Fiona Apple has been one of the most interesting female artists with unique ideas and amazing vocal performances. Her career has been around for 3 decades now as she experiments with lyrics, ideas, and vocal abilities. Also, her music videos are something to admire. She uses them to unleash her visual imagination. For example, we have Every Single Night, which has very abstract and surreal images, which I really recommend watching. It also has thought-provoking lyrics. She never shied away from being a sensitive, vulnerable, give-it-all sort of artist. And in this album specifically, she is no different. On the contrary, she unleashes her experimenting self. Fetch the Bolt Cutters is a very amusing and enjoyable album with very interesting vocals and instruments. Freedom is a very prominent theme in this album. She tries to break free from all the mental, physical, and social chains which are imposed by others on her. And this is very clear in songs such as Ladies and songs like Kick Me Under the Table All You Want, where she discusses how she reacts in pretentious gatherings with fake people. Also, the opening track, I Want You to Love Me, has a very interesting approach to the use of music instruments. And the repetition of the word I want you to love me gives a very aggressive approach to the persona. The album was recorded at her own house, and they used very interesting choices as guitars and drums, which adds a layer of realism and rawness to her songs. And she uses breathing, screams, whispers, dog barks, and so much more as an instrument. Overall, a very creative album and definitely recommended. Now on to the final and my favorite recommendation so far, Run the Jewels. Run the Jewels is the definition of consistency. Run the Jewels 4 is the 4th album from the duo, in which each time they release a new album, it feels like their best one yet. Even though Killer Mike and LP have completely different rapping styles, but their chemistry is off the charts. And this is clear ever since the release of their debut album, Run the Jewels 1. LP is a New York rapper with complex rhyme scheme, fast-paced lyrics, and lyrics that tend to have double and even triple meaning, with a knack of using big words, which is why his verses need to be listened to a few times before you fully grasp it. But that's the beauty of it. While Killer Mike is an Atlanta rapper that just hits you with his brilliance from the very first line you hear. You can notice how well written his words are, the wordplay, the metaphors. It's not that his lyrics are simple, but he tells you his argument from the very first time you hear him. Now on to Run the Jewels 4. This album is a killer. Each and every single song in this album is a must, and it's also socially relevant to the Black Lives Matter movement, and the production is on point, and it has a killer feature list. It has people like Zach De La Rocha, Pharrell Williams, 2 Chainz, Gangsta Boo, Josh Homme, Mavis Staples, and Greg Nice. And these are all huge names. The album kicks in with high-energy, mind-blowing intro track, Yankee and the Brave, where Killer Mike and LP nail one of the hardest rhyme schemes I've ever seen. with an unhinged flow. They kind of remind the fans of what they can do. Also, some of the highlights of the albums: Walking in the Snow, which is excellently produced by LP himself with a very catchy chorus from Gangsta Boo. It also contains one of the best verses for Killer Mike, where he talks about education and quickly shifts to police brutality, as he wrote his verse right after the tragic incident of George Floyd, which shows how relevant Run the Jewels is, with their political and social commentary. And of course, one of the best songs, Just, in which Pharrell Williams nails a chorus about slave masters posing on dollars, which should go down in history as one of the slickest bars ever said. And the screaming vocals from Jarosha sounds like heaven to me, because I'm a very huge fan of Rage Against the Machine. I'm so happy for his return for another feature with Run the Jewels. Another favorite of mine is Ooh La La, which is a great shift from heavy subject matters to flexing songs. The song features woozy piano loop that sounds absolutely amazing, and its lyrics is some of the coolest and finest lyrics in the whole album. Honestly, each and every song in this album is worth talking about. We have Out of Sight, which in my opinion is the best production I've seen the entire year, and we have the amazing performance from Mavis Staples in Pulling the Pin, and Josh Homme's late night smoky riffs that he delivers in the same song. So basically, Run the Jewels did it again. They delivered a multi-layered, socially relevant, high-paced album yet again, for the fourth time in a row, with a guest list to educate you about post-punk and hip-hop culture, with experimental, forward-thinking, hardcore production. It might take you a few times to unpack every single thing in the album, but that's totally fine. It is the joy of the album. I highly recommend it, and I believe this is a very strong contender to the best album of the year. What were some of your favorite albums this quarantine? And do you like my recommendations? Have you listened to any of the albums I've mentioned? Thank you so much for watching, and bye!